Welcome to today's webinar, which is called Researching the History of a Building Online, with Jessica Kwan, who is Special Projects Manager at Vancouver Heritage Foundation, Bronwyn Smith, who is Archival Assistant at the City of Vancouver Archives, and myself, I am Harriet, and I am Program Manager here at Vancouver Heritage Foundation. So for those of you who don't know, Vancouver Heritage Foundation is a registered charity that promotes the appreciation and conservation of heritage places in Vancouver. So we do this through a range of educational programming, such as this one, special projects, information resources, and grants as well. As an organisation, we recognise the diverse history and cultural heritage of Vancouver, and that the city is located on the traditional, ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. As most people are spending more time at home and exploring more of their local neighbourhoods, we thought that this webinar would be a great session to run at this time. This is Vancouver Heritage Foundation's third webinar so far, so thank you very much for signing up. There will be a follow-up email where you'll be able to submit your feedback as well. For those of you who are working towards your Vancouver Heritage Foundation Conservation Certificate, this webinar will give you a credit towards that, and to receive that credit we will be sending out a short quiz for you to fill out, which you will also find in the follow-up email. If you'd like to find out more about this certificate, I'll be including some details in that email as well. And to receive professional credits for other organisations, you will need to self-report those. So before we get started, I'd like to just go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event. Today, we'll be using 823 Jackson Avenue as a bit of a case study to show you different ways to research historic buildings online. So to start with, Jessica is going to give you an introduction to this building, which you may also know as Fountain Chapel or the Churchland Studios. She will then show you how you can use VHF's own website as a research tool, as well as a few other online digital resources that are available for research projects. After a short break for questions, Bronwyn will then explore how you can use Vancouver Archives resources online to research a historic building. So you will be kept on mute during this session, so if you have any issues or questions, please type them into the chat box that you can find at the bottom of your screen. So I'll be monitoring that throughout the session, and there will be a couple of opportunities to answer questions that have popped up in that box there. This session is being recorded and will be shared with those who aren't able to make this session at this specific time, and it could also be used for VHF's marketing efforts in the future. So before I hand over to Jessica, I'm just going to do a quick introduction to both of them. So Bronwyn Smith, who you'll be hearing from later, is Archival Assistant at the City of Vancouver Archives. She has a particular interest in neighbourhoods and the history of houses. And Jessica, she has worked with Vancouver Heritage Foundation as Special Projects Manager since 2011. She has a deep family history rooted in BC, and she wants to find time to really dig into that research. So I hope you enjoy, and hand over to Jessica, who's going to start sharing her screen now. Thanks, Jessica.
All right. Okay. So I just wanted to first start off with saying I'm not an archivist, but I have learned a lot from the experiences of working with VHF and all the people that we've worked with in organizations who are really doing important research, archives, community archives, personal collections, and just individuals who are holding all these records within their own homes. And I want to sort of emphasize the fact that so much about what is recorded and transcribed online currently hasn't really been discovered. So there's a lot of work we can still do. And if I can learn how to use these online resources, so can you. So really don't be afraid to ask for help from me in the future or anyone else, because there's a lot of great research to be done and you can all contribute. What I want to explain first too is that VHF's website resources, we have a section called Learn With Us, and I'm just going to move my cursor here, you can see Learn with Us. And if you go into this section, there's lots of amazing resources. This categorizes a lot of work that we've done over the years, research, case studies, policies, information about houses in general and sites in Vancouver, and other organizations that have really excellent resources here.
Just,
And
sorry
yeah.
to interrupt. I don't think you're sharing your screen just yet.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No
I
problem.
don't see the section for the gallery for seeing myself too. Do you understand?
So if you just press share screen and get up your presentation, that would be great.
Okay. Okay, sorry. We're out of a different section here. Okay. Okay, got it. Okay, so can everyone see the website now? Hopefully.
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay, great. So as I was saying, if you look at the VHF website in itself, Learn with Us is a really excellent section to actually go through all of these different categories, whether there are lots of guides that we've created ourselves with content from heritage house tours, case studies, and working with other people, or if you just want to go to Heritage Basics and FAQs, there's a whole section, and there's questions. You click on these questions, and there's an answer from us, or another resource you can use. And there is currently a research guide on here that is going to be updated. And I will send all of you, whoever would like it, an updated version that combines the one that I give the volunteers who do research for us, as well as general research. So two things that we usually use for research is the building nominations for the city's register. I'll go into a bit about that with one of our research resources, but really in terms of putting your site on the register, you need to do a lot of extensive research, and some of the things from our guide will explain all of those things that go into that. Another thing too is that we have special projects that really do dive into things on the Site Finder, which is the city's register, and that we've created a website called the Heritage Site Finder here. I'll just put my cursor over it. And you can search by sites and by residential categories, significance, and we've tried to add more to the story there with a visual, a photo, current photos, archival photos, and blurbs. And then we also have another resource called Places That Matter, and it's a plaque project and an online history project. It's a website which has images, first-hand accounts, stories that can be submitted to, and it's a full page. I'm just showing you a screenshot here. But if you go to these two sites, it's sort of a place where a lot of the research can go if you're doing your own research and it somehow intersects with what we're doing. There's many places you can actually contribute to research of a place and a site. So for example, I just put on here that Fountain Chapel, which the reason why Fountain Chapel is always associated with this site is actually for its nomination on the register. Fountain Chapel is sort of a significant part of the history. It's not the whole history of the site, but it's an important part. And it's always been sort of highlighted, and it falls into also the Places That Matter, that's why it is actually, the Fountain Chapel itself is a place that matter. It was a nomination for that specific time in history, and I'll go into that a bit more. So a bit more about that. Since 2013, when we've started the Site Finder, and it's 2016 since we've done the Places That Matter, we've had over 100 research volunteers assist on these projects. And there's many projects around the city in terms of archives that volunteers can help with. And all the research comes out of a lot of what the research guide that we're going to talk about comes from. Also too, there's places on both of these websites to share your stories. So currently, I don't have the right image here. I don't want to go into every website, but you click on Learn More, and on there you'll see a submit story for the Site Finder now, which is just new. We just did this last month. And also in the Places That Matter, you go to submit story, and you can then give your own feedback, stories, send us a photo. And that's what we really want to see for a lot of these projects, is actually the personal connections. And I think it really just adds a lot more to why these places should be valued, understood, and the diverse histories that we can all see ourselves and connect to. So just one more thing too is that be warned that if you start researching one building or one site, I'm pretty sure you'll never be able to stop, because it is an amazing sort of place of possibilities, and you find one little bit of detail and then you go off and research that, and it just sort of keeps going. And you'll probably be bitten by the research bug after you start checking out some of the resources. So one more thing too is the purpose of when you start researching, maybe think about your own biases. but also what are you hoping to find out in your research? And sort of be prepared that you might actually find out a lot more than you anticipated. And a lot of questions and stumbling blocks in terms of not finding answers to all the questions you might have. So it can be a very frustrating place to do research online and in person, but also very rewarding in terms of you might discover a lot more than you truly anticipated. Another thing too is to ask questions and find your personal connection within those. There's a lot of things that we can't answer, and obviously the research that we do and that we present on many of our platforms, it's not the full picture, and it never will be the full picture. But there are always things that are sort of missing too, and that's part of what we're trying to get at, addressing some of the things that are missing from the research online that we can't find. So I want to go to also, where do we start? I think today there's a lot of amazing resources, and land and context are part of that, and understanding where in the city you are. So I just wanted to show really briefly that there is a Squamish Atlas. And right here, it's right in the Falls Creek Flats. There's a name for it, Squaches. And that they've marked it as the significance of that neighborhood, which is also Jackson Avenue in that area. And then also the Musqueam map has a name and a marking here. So there are a lot of resources as well for the Indigenous populations that have come before the city, before those city records. And they're starting to put a lot more online in a really good interactive maps. Just want to do a really brief book show, even though I know this is not online. But Bruce McDonald's Vancouver Visual History has some great maps too that sort of take you before the city became formalized, and a lot more of the colonial history and sites there. So it's a good place to start as well. So the best thing to do first, though, honestly, is to just Google it. We really can find so much on Google, whether it's city reports, anything that goes to the Heritage Department and commissions, changes, assessments, everything can be found online in transcripts. So a lot of this is now available to find online. So if you have your address, like 823 Jackson, or your own address, you can start there in Google, and a lot of things will come up, as well as archival images and images. The city does have the van map, which is a bit of a wieldy website. It takes up a lot of bandwidth to sort of open this data that has a lot of information. But what it looks like, and this will all be in a guide that you will get links to afterwards, it looks like this. And you put in your address and the street name, and it will come up with the little spot where it's found. And I've just closed up on where it is exactly, but it's right there. 823 Jackson currently is on this corner at Pryor and Jackson and Strathcona. Now, when you click on that little box, you then get all this information, which is also things that you can get from the BC assessment if you do on their website. But the important bits here is you have all this bit about the year it's built. That's a really big key. That's part of the story. You have lots and blocks and district lots. And this is where you might need to use this instead of the direct address, because addresses will change. Street names will change, and the street number will change associated with the building, but the lots and the district lots won't. So sometimes we like to just keep this written somewhere so that we can do a further search to confirm if something was on that exact lot. And there's just a bit more information here. So I'm going to show too then, in this van map legacy section, this is not the current version, there's two versions. I will give you links to both. It's good to know that there's an aerial section. This is very interesting. Now, fire insurance maps obviously are to show where in the city there's structures, whether it's wood structures, stone structures, different structures, and that is indicated by the colors, yellow and pink. Now, when I click over here on aerial, and I go to Gode's fire insurance map here, you have to click and click. This is one whole layer of the city. The entire map of the city is overlaid with the 1912 fire insurance map. And this is the only year currently that is like this that you can find digitally across the whole city. But it's really fascinating because you can plunk in your address, you can see where it is here, but then you can see what was actually there in 1912, and you can sort of see and confirm, was there a site, was there a building? Their street names are here too, and they might be different from today, of course, because things have changed. But it's just such a good way of comparing current and past, and you can only get that little slice in 1912. Otherwise, though, the fire insurance maps are available in city archives. VPL special collections, but they might be only in paper form or in a hard copy form. So you will have to visit them if you want to get a specific close-up. But some may be digitized, so it's good also to contact them and ask if there's a certain street or area you're looking for on a fire insurance map. What's important about that too is that the city did not become the city we know today, as in all of Vancouver, east, west, south, until 1929. And there were 3 cities, the municipalities of Point Grey, Vancouver, and South Vancouver. So when you're doing research before 1929, it's really important to know what city you're in, and then you'll have to go to those records, and they might not be as complete as you might hope. So there are some discrepancies in those city records before 1929, and then after that it becomes one city of Vancouver in terms of records. Otherwise, you can start with researching. I just want to show this too, is that the fire insurance map here shows from 1893, and this is work done by James Johnstone, who has an excellent blog called When a Old House Whispers, which I have indicated at the end of this presentation. It shows here that the site had a Swedish church and also residents on it. So this is even before the year 1910. If you notice from the van map, we have 1910, but we know in 1893 there were these structures. So we know that there were different structures on the site before the current structure, which is the one we know today at 823 Jackson, and the address was of course different. So that's just showing you a bit of digging into the fire insurance maps does make us aware of what was there before the current structure, because of course the address today would only be associated with the current structure if you looked into the map itself today. Yeah, so another few things before I go into the VPL directories is that there's permits for construction, water, and those hookups kind of help see when the starting point was from when you actually put in your permit to when the final construction and occupancy of a site took place. And that's what I want to get out of here and show you the VPL BC directories as an excellent resource. And this is how you can determine who is in the building at a certain time and for how long. And you can check every year up until 1955 online. And otherwise, you'll have to go visit the archives or the VPL directly to see the paper versions. There's also an excellent few more things that Elizabeth Walker's Street Names of Vancouver, which is a great book that I'll show you online though. This is the book. The Buildings Permit Database by Heritage Vancouver Society. And there are some digital images and fire insurance maps and other things online. So I'm just going to click out of the screen here and get to hopefully to the live version of the VPL site. So here we go. Hopefully you can see that. So the city directories, as you can see here, it goes by year 1860 all the way to the 50s, the bottom. So I really highly recommend reading how to search. They've got excellent explanations here, tips about when you look at things, what are you seeing? You're not sure about the information. So make sure you do look at this online directory for tips. What you would do if we know from the van map that 1910 was the current building start point, as is indicated, you could then go to 1910 in the directories. And in here you'll see that, oh, okay, City of Vancouver. I'm just going to click part 1. I know it's Jackson Avenue, so it's a J. There's all these different aspects of the city directories in there. It's excellent stuff. Take your time to look through it. I often don't have time. There's advertisements, other things, indexes, government listings. So lots of interesting social and personal information of the times, what was happening in the city. Then there's a street directory and the names directory. Names is the people. So we're going to go to streets because we're going to look up Jackson. So there's systems of numbering, and then the street names are in alphabetical letters. You click on the J, I go to J, right? And then we see here the page that's been scanned in Jackson Avenue. So it's 683. Oh, sorry, 823. So it's not, let's see here. All right, so I gotta go back. So you can see your Jackson here. I think I gotta go to previous page. Next. All right, so, and now if you look here, in 1910, actually the address is 833 and it says Norwegian Lutheran Church. So the address might be different, but we can identify here that it's the Norwegian Lutheran Church. And always when I tell people to look through things, make sure you look all around, because sometimes, as I said, the addresses change. And then we can go back. You could go to 1912. You look again, Vancouver directory, streets. Jackson. You just have to click up here if it's too far or too far over. Jackson Avenue. And please also note that the listed names here, there could be the commercial building, a commercial enterprise, the name of an office building, but also people's names. And sometimes, so as you might see, could see Japanese or Chinese. That is a person of that descent, but they don't have the actual name sometimes. It also might say vacant. So there wasn't somebody there at the time. Perhaps it really was vacant, or perhaps somebody wasn't there when they came to check on it. Let's see here, 82. So still 833 Norwegian Lutheran Church we have in 1912. So from the research, though, that we do know that it wasn't until a bit later that it became Fountain Chapel. So clearly how you can check, and the directories may not always be super accurate, but you can confirm if it has been a certain year based on who shows up at that address. Here's where the street names of Vancouver is. The full book is on here. You just have to click on here, and it's excellent for history and research of all the street names in Vancouver and their histories. There's more information about how to find your house. And the other one I just want to show you very quickly now is the Society's permit database. So when you go here, I'm just going to put in the address, and we'll see what happens. 823, and then Jackson. Now, nothing came up. Maybe I'll put Avenue. So nothing came up. Now this could be to do with the dates here associated with what's available, since they only go up to 28 and 25. But when I put Jackson, sometimes you have to really fiddle around with what is the actual information, the specifics of the fields when you put it in. I get a bit more. So Jackson Avenue. We have the Norwegian Lutheran Church. And we know then from this is the actual permit for the construction. We know the builder was Mr. Mellish. We have the block and the district lot and sub and all that. And we have the date and the street number. So 1910, 831 Jackson Avenue, and it's a frame church and the values. So this is really helpful for some beginner information about the time of the permit and then builders and owners. So I'm just gonna get out of this. Sorry, I'm running. This always takes a lot longer than I want. So that's just one quick way of determining who was there, the address, the time frame, and you might have to go through quite a few years to sort of determine who came later and up to present. Some other great resources are the BC Census, the vital statistics, if you want to get to know more about the people. If there's just a name associated with an address, you can look up their information there. BC Archives online, UBC and SFU have really good special collections as well with photographs. And then newspapers online is another excellent resource that really gives context to what was going on. So I just want to show you, there's a great website, the Biographical Dictionary of Architects in Canada, where you can find a bit more about Mr. Mellish. All right, there's a bit more. And we just want to show here that he designed the church in 1910, but he also did another church on East First Avenue. You can see the similarities there. One thing too is that for people and for information of digital records, sometimes it's hard to find images. Now, a regular search in various places won't necessarily have the original photo. So this is actually the family that lived there before the Fountain Chapel. This is an image of Nora Hendricks. And this is an image of newspaper showing families coming to church. So there's just different places where you may be able to find different kinds of images, won't necessarily be the most obvious. In the 20s to the 50s, the American Methodist Episcopal took over the site. And these images came most directly from a family, Gibson family, who lived in the neighborhood and who attended the church. So it's trying to show you that this is not in any formal record archive currently, but it would be great if it did find its way into a record, because these images show really the people who were there and the life that this site had at this time. I just want to show you more photos quickly, sorry. There was a stamp that was done quite recently, image and photos of Nora and other families. So just showing you the interest that's come from that. Other people associate the church, and this is research that was done by an individual, not an archivist or historian, but someone who was really persistent in finding more information, looking at people's names, maybe trying to find where they are now and connect with them. There was a pastor, Mac Elroy, who was there at the time in the 60s, and Annie Gerard, who was also there post-time when it was Fountain Chapel. So there's a lot of history that can be delved into. I also wanted to share that HAMP, which is a Hogan's Alley Memorial Project, did a lot of research into this site, and their work was really instrumental in connecting with the history, uncovering its history, and they had a special service with the Basil Haka Lutheran, which was a Chinese church that then moved east. They came in 2008 and had a service together and recognized the history together. So that's sort of a really nice tie into how these communities and histories can be shared and documented here. This is just their photos that they have, and that's all we have of that event. Other great history projects that I want to allude to as well is Black Strathcona, and they did their own Fountain Chapel video and history, and the two blogs that I shared the history from here that I'll also send to you. So one last thing I think I just wanted to reference is that community-based archives are really quite important, and from what I've learned with the projects we do online is that a lot of the work is not being digitized, or they don't have a place to put all the materials, just a bit like Major Matthews did in the beginning. He kept everything in his house, the city of Vancouver, and I think it's really important that there are all these different places where the history of this one site that went from Norwegian and Swedish and African Methodist and Haka Basil, and today as a residence. All these stories have many places where they can be kept, but I think the purpose of what we were doing with our online projects is it's one place where we can hopefully share a little bit about all this research going on and sort of show the whole continuum evolution of that site from hopefully the beginning-ish time to even in the future, what's going to happen. And I just wanted to sort of stop there.
Great, thank you, Jess. Bear with me 1 second. If you could stop sharing your screen for a second, that'd be great. Okay, perfect. Fantastic. So we have had some questions pop up. Thank you very much for that introduction, Jessica. That was fantastic. One person is asking, what are your initial questions that you have when you first start research on a site?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I think that really is actually, everyone has a different question for that one. But I think if we want to determine when it existed, who brought it into existence, whether it's the builder, the builder, the architect or not, or the community, that's sort of the key to why it's existing there at all. And then after that, just the dates. So start off with when was it actually there, and then you can go, as I showed you, to research by year. You can really then get a fuller picture of who was there. So I think you really have to establish the actual site itself, what was it and when did it actually exist? Because if you're looking at a site from today's perspective, there could be many different buildings on that site before. So that's what you sort of uncover. As I said, it's sort of up to you what is the most important. But for us, we just want to get as best of a full view of that site as possible, because we know there's lots of different aspects that are well known and a lot that are not as well known. So it's really just enlightening all of the history.
Definitely. And I can imagine it would be really satisfying to kind of research the people and then eventually find photos of the people that you...
Well, that's the thing, is that, you see all these names and you can find a bit about their history, but the photos too are very rewarding. So if you know who the people are, then you can actually do more archival photographic imagery. And then people seem to connect with that really well.
Definitely. And that's why when you see those images on Places That Matter community resource, that's really interesting to see those illustrated as well. So Jessica, we have someone asking, is the lot number constant from the beginning? Even though the address has changed, it sounded like that's a yes, the lot number does stay the same.
I believe so. I can definitely double check with a few other people. Maybe Bronwyn knows that better too. But it seems like that, that lot was what was carved out, by the city. And even before that, you can look at the before city lots. That shouldn't change unless someone has bought it and sold it, which sometimes happens.
Right.
But generally, those are good places to double check anything because the address has changed. And a lot of volunteers say that to me, oh, I can't figure out what's what. And as you saw, the Norwegian address was 833, right? And if you're looking up 823, you might miss it. So you do have to look in the directories to see around the site, look for that, something that could be that address. It may
Yeah,
not be the exact one that you think it is. Yeah.
definitely. And that's why I think this as a case study is a really good example, as it has had different names and different communities through time. So yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And one last question. I know that you do a lot of outreach to people who look after these sites specifically for places that matter. Do you have any advice for someone who's actually reaching out to those stewards or the owners?
Yes, I definitely do. I think, we can go in there thinking that we want to find out all this information and it's so exciting, but I think we do have to also respect, first of all, that it's their own history, their own privacy. So always sort of go in with, go in listening first, because it may be history for some people that is not happy, or it might be controversial for themselves, or they don't know it. So I found that when we've connected with a lot of families or even just site owners, people aren't necessarily happy about the fact that their sites are very well known or have something associated with it. So I think not pushing people too hard in any respect is good. But I think if you can show why you're doing it, why you're researching, maybe that, what is the value in it for them or to work together, I think you'll get a lot more out of the collaborative effort, because I think that we can help lots of groups and places research more. It's just the capacity is everything. And I've learned that I really wanted to help more organizations, like really encourage them to get things digitized, to get their things in order, and to share them in ways that they want to share them, because it is their stories and their places. And we're just trying to provide a platform, but there is a lot that can be done. And I think just approaching it really sensitively, and that if they want to share it and tell you, especially oral history, I didn't touch on that super well, but I've had it here on my screen, is that, we want to respect their stories, but if they don't want to share something with us, then we do have to respect that we're not going to share that with others unless it's agreed upon.
Absolutely. And yeah, sharing those different stories. And I think that's why Places That Matter has because everyone can add their stories to it. It really paints a broader picture. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, Jessica, we are going to go over to Bronwyn now to look at the City of Vancouver archives, but we will come back into this gallery view afterwards to answer more of your questions. But thank you very much, Jessica. And over to you, Bronwyn.
Thank you. Just touching about that lot question, generally the lots stay the same, but sometimes if subdivision has happened, in history, you'll sometimes get a different lot value, but generally the legal description stays pretty constant throughout time. So yeah, so going into that, welcome to the City of Vancouver archives portion of this presentation. So I'm going to start here on our city website. This is what you will get to if you just Google City of Vancouver archives. And I'm going to just touch a little bit on what kind of resources we have in our holdings that might help you in your research process of looking into building histories. So they include things like water service records, building permit registers, property tax records, sectional and fire insurance maps, city directories, photographs, and some architectural plans and drawings. But don't worry, you don't need to quickly write all of those down, because you can actually go to our site, the website here, and if you scroll down slightly on the left-hand column, you will see this lovely research at the archives. If you click on that, that will take you to this page. And this is a bunch of our reference guides, and these are pretty common research topics that people come into the archives with. So they're great reference guides as to get you started into your research. And there's this one specifically for buildings and houses. So if I click on that, that's what it will look like. It's a several page document that goes into a bit more detail as to what those records we have are, what kind of information you can glean from them, and also points you as to a little bit of how to search for those records on our database. But if I go back to our city site, back to the home page here, the way to actually do searches on our database is by clicking down here on this Search the Archives Holdings, and that will take you to our database. Now, I apologize, I am going to swap over to our internal site for the database because we had a recent upgrade on our database, and it's the public site is working a little bit slowly these days, and we're just trying to iron out those wrinkles. So this is the internal site. The only difference really being is the color and a few little icons, but it functions the same as the public site. So what I often do when walking researchers how to use our database is you'll land on this page, and the first thing I say to researchers is click in this search bar, and you'll get this advanced search option to come up. So if I click on that, I'll be taken to this page here. And we're going to use 823 Jackson Avenue as our case study, obviously, here. The reason I like going to the advanced search page is it gives me a number of filter options should I choose to use them. And I generally, because I always pop over to the advanced search page, I actually feel much more comfortable on it than just the simple search page. So first of all, I'm going to demonstrate how to search for photos, specifically with this building in mind. I'm going to do that in two different ways, so two different scenarios. And then I'm going to touch a little bit on how to research for the descriptions of records in our holdings and what that looks like. So as my first example, the one thing that I might do for researching a certain address or building is to punch in the address. And what you'll see in our search bar is you'll notice that I've put the address in quotation marks. And the reason for that is our database is very specific. And if you don't put it in quotation marks, it doesn't necessarily string that into a phrase. This example is, I have tried it without putting the quotation marks, and it gives me pretty similar results. But when it comes to researching things like, for instance, Burrard Bridge, if you put Burrard Bridge in without quotation marks, you're going to get descriptions of records that don't have anything to do with Burrard and Bridge, because our database is looking for descriptions that has Burrard and Bridge, but not necessarily in one phrase. So that's the first thing to remember about our database. The second is if I misspell something, or if there's multiple spellings for something, it's going to only read what I type in my search bar. The one thing our database isn't specific about is it doesn't really care if you put capital letters or not. But the spelling and also the quotation marks are pretty important. So I'm putting in the address because that's a really obvious search term I might try. And then I'm going to go to this box here, the general material designation, and click on the drop-down menu. And the nice thing about this is I can filter my results to just getting photographs. And a lot of people do come to the archives, and mainly they're interested in seeing the visual of the neighborhood they live in, or if they can find a photo of the building which they live in or that they're researching. So if I do that, I press search. One result, that was very easy, nice, easy. I can look at it, I can see it's Jackson Avenue. I open up my results, and you'll get, this is a description plus the digitized image of the actual negative. So from this, you can see up at the top here from these breadcrumbs, you can see what particular phone or records group it's in. So it's in the City of Vancouver phone. It's part of this Heritage Survey reports, and then part of the Vancouver Heritage Survey file. From the title, that is how we came up with this particular record. And then we have this really important thing called the reference code. And I'm going to highlight that specifically and especially for photographs. If you find a photo that you're interested in all your research, please write down that reference code, because we have thousands upon thousands of photos in our database and in our holdings. And if you don't write down that reference code, unless you know exactly how you found that photo, when you get to your 10th search, you may not be able to find that photo again if you didn't write down that reference code. So please make our lives easier as well and write down that reference code, because it's a really easy way to find this image again in our database. You'll also notice you can see what date this image was taken. You can see here what the physical item is that we have in our holdings. And if you continue scrolling down here, you can get the copyright status of this particular image. Now I'm just going to scroll back up to the top. If I want a digital JPEG format of this image, I can just click on the image and it's going to automatically bring up a high resolution JPEG scan of the negative itself. And then you can just right click and save that to your computer and reproduce it however you like and use it in your research. So we've done a lot of digitizing of images. So that seems really easy, slam dunk. You get your photo right away, and why am I sitting here teaching you how to use the database? The reason I did that example first is it's just a nice, quick, easy way of showing how you can get a photo. However, I'm going to caution you that that is often not always the case with buildings and photographs in our holdings. There are a lot of photographs that do not contain address information in the description. So to find an image of a building that you're looking at, you have to go about it using a few other search term strategies. You'll also notice that this particular image, going back here, was taken in the 70s. The city did a big heritage building survey across the city in the late 70s and early 80s. And those photos tend to be tagged with their exact address in the description, either in the title or in the description. But that's kind of just that period of time of photographs. So if we now talk about other search strategies in terms of how to find photographs, what you can do is I'm going to, once again, go into my advanced search page. And I'm going to I often write down what my search terms are, just so that I'm not searching things that I've already searched before. But really good ways to find photographs of buildings or neighborhoods is by using just the street name. So just taking off the house number, trying parallel streets, trying perpendicular streets, trying the neighborhood as a name, or even adjacent neighborhoods. Also trying things such as local landmarks. So in this case, you could try maybe Georgia Viaduct or the Dunsmuir Viaduct because it's very nearby. And another one is, again, alternate addresses to see if maybe it was tagged under or described under a different address. So using that strategy, I'm going to use Strathcona. Strathcona as my search term. And you'll notice I don't need to put that in quotation marks. And the reason for that is it's one single word. Our database is going to see it as Strathcona. But now I'm going to add a new criteria. So I'm going to click on that. And that brings up some Boolean search term options. So I'm going to click and. So I'm going to search for Strathcona. And this is quite a nice little term, aerial. And I've been able to find a number of photos of buildings through combining the neighborhood name and the word aerial, and that just looks for aerial photographs. I'm going to go back down to this general material designation, click down again, and going to filter it to just photographs, because that's all I'm interested in right now. Click search, and we get 4 results, which is it's not many results, but it's great to have a few results. And because I've done this search before, I already know that I want to go to this second image here. And so if I click on it, I get, again, the title, the description, this reference code, which I would jot down if I'm interested in this photo. You can see it was taken in the 1970s, who the photographer is, etc. Now, if I click on this image, we get a bigger image, and then click on it again. You can see that Fountain Chapel, or 823 Jackson Avenue, is right here. And it's one of those cases where this photograph is not described in terms of addresses, but because of using the word Strathcona and aerial, I was able to find this a photo of this property at another time. That said, though, I do want to warn you that not every building in Vancouver has a photo in our holdings. And I just know that from personal experience of researching the house that I live in. I have done many many searches, and I have not come up with any photo of that particular building. So sometimes we have lots of photos for buildings and sometimes none at all. So I just want to temper your expectations there, but it is a lot of fun to get into searching old neighborhood photos, even just to get a sense of what a neighborhood was like during certain decades. So that's photographs, the long and short of photographs. I'm going to take you back to our database and do another search term, but shifting the focus on to textual records. So photographs are one of those things that you can think about how a photo would be described and try those search terms. But when it comes to textual records, a lot of times you need to step back a little bit and think about what kind of record are you looking for? What kind of record type would that be? And our reference guide is a very good place to start because it talks about what kind of record types. And what you're going to do with a lot of textual records is you're going to be doing a search. You'll get a description of that textual record, but you won't necessarily get a digitized image of that textual record, nor will you get an explicit index or description as to what is actually contained in that record. And so that's a case where you find the description of the record and you would come and visit us and actually look at the record here. So as in my example, I'm going back to the advanced search page. I'm going to touch back onto building permit registers. So to find the descriptions of the building permit registers, I'm going to try building permits, and I'm putting it in quotes because I want that as a phrase. And I'm going to try the word register here. I'm not going to put on any of the other filters, and I'm just going to click search. So I get 16 results. And from the Van map, which Jessica had perfectly touched on earlier, I get from Van map, you can see what date approximately a building was built. Sometimes that date is out by a year or two. So it's always good to go to these registers of building permits and to actually confirm what date you're looking at for a building. So it's this 1910 to 1911 register of building permits that the 823 Jackson Avenue will be in. So I click on that, and this is what you get. So you'll notice that there isn't an image to go with this, it's just a description. And you can see it's labeled as what this item is it's of textual record nature. And you can see the reference code, it's part of the City of Vancouver phone again, and a part of Building Permit Registers series, and what the dates are, and this little note as to how the records are arranged. And this is one of those things where you would come down to the archives to view. But fortunately, and Jessica had lovely shown you this website, but we have a link to it. It's Heritage Vancouver's transcription of these particular records. So if I click on that, you'll be taken to Heritage Vancouver building permits and search and view the online database, which looks like this. You will notice that depending on the area of Vancouver that you're looking at in the permit, they only go up to the mid-20s to late 20s. And our records that we have in our holdings go up to the late 40s. So if the building you're researching is later than 1925, 1928, that is, you would definitely have to come down and visit us to look at those records itself. But also just to give you a sense of what the 1910 to 1911 register looks like should you come down and visit us. I'm just going to pop over to a photo of what this register looks like, so you get a little bit more of a sense of what you've seen the description. I've shown you this description, but this is, oops, sorry, this is what the actual physical item folder looks like. And the next slide is just, it's a copy. We have this also on microfilm in our reading room, and this is a copy of the page that the 823 Jackson Avenue was registered under. So right there, you can see it's the Norwegian Lutheran Church at that point, and that it was listed under 831 Jackson Avenue. So that's in a very brief overview as to how to search our database. Our database is one of those things that the more time you spend with it, the more sense it will make to you. But that said, if you ever do need any help or any guidance on your research, you can always give us a call or send us an email. And that's our email and our phone number line, and we can give you, well, we can at least guide you into the right direction as to what kind of records you might be wanting to search for and how to go about searching for that. So that's my very brief introduction to using our database. So back to you, Harriet.
Hello again. Thank you, Bronwyn. That was great. So in terms of what is and isn't digitalized in the archives, could you just give us a bit more of an overview on that? I know obviously you've done a lot of work with the photographs, and by the way, the aerial photograph of the Fountain Chapel is so cool. Like, I can imagine just zooming. I wanted to zoom in to look at all those old cars, and it's really great.
Yes, so we tend to focus our digitization efforts on photographs primarily, and that's in part because of preservation and keeping those negatives, etc., in better condition rather than bringing them out to the reading room. Also, we have a decade 1970s of council meeting minutes digitized, but that's kind of the sum total of our textual records. And we have also digitized a number of maps. So those fire insurance, the 1912 fire insurance map is one example of what we have digitized. And when it comes to digitization, it tends to be connected with grant funding.
Right.
Or specific projects.
Yeah, yeah. So are you working on any in particular at the moment in terms of digitalization?
Yes, so our scanning tech has been working on some of our the tax assessment records that we don't have a backup master copy for. We just finished, we haven't digitized all the photos, but we had a large grant to digitize a lot of the BCGLA photographs that were donated by Ron Dutton last year, or it might have been the year before, I can't remember. But those have been the two big projects that we've had going on for a while.
Great. And if someone were to find something that they needed to come and see in person, how is it working at the moment?
Yeah, so in normal life, we're open Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and you just walk through the door.
Yeah.
But in these days, we are still open. It's just by appointment. You just give us a phone call or an email, and my colleague will help you out and try to sort out what your research topic is, first of all, and how we can help you. And then we do have appointments that you can book. But that's the way to go about researching in our read room right now until things change.
Yeah, that's fair enough, for sure. And I can definitely vouch for Bronwyn's tip of taking note of the number for the numbers for the photographs, because I've definitely been there before when I've been researching for some of the houses from the Heritage House tour. So yeah, top tip right there. And I was also wondering what kind of buildings are included in the architectural plans at the archives?
So those tend to be more very large buildings, so well-known residents like Highcroft,
Right.
or public buildings, a bunch of churches, although this particular building I did not manage to find any architectural plans for, or apartment buildings, a lot of single individual houses, smaller houses around town. We don't unfortunately have those architectural plans at this point, if we ever get any of those sorts of things, but it tends to be more the well-known building sites or public spaces.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And Jessica, this might be one for you actually. Jenny's asking, well, first of all, she said, thank you very much. It's been very informative. She's asking for pointers on researching newspapers for houses or building focused research.
I'm not super, I don't have a lot of experience with this directly, but I think, so looking for specifics through newspaper articles, like about?
Yeah, so I saw in your list you had newspaper.com, didn't you?
Yeah, I think that's a great one in general. I think though you need the names of particular people that you want to look up, and then it will come up in a search. Of course, the address or neighborhood, or maybe something that happened, like an event or time frame. I think those are what we want to give context to. If, okay, we know that this person or this event happened, maybe that would be something that was in the news and newsworthy, but also perhaps like obituaries or information about the business, advertisements, things like that. And just, yeah, usually newsworthy items will come up. So it's sort of, you don't know what you're going to get, I think. If you do a search.
For sure, for sure. Okay, well, I think that's about it in terms of questions that we have. But what we will be doing is in the follow-up email, we'll be including a lot of the links that we've discussed today in the session and resources, and take them from Jessica's presentation, just so that everything's in one place for everyone. We also have a document that goes through some of that in further detail, so we'll be sending that out to everyone in the follow-up email. But I wanted to thank you both for participating. It's been really helpful as an intro and overview. I know last fall we were at Aberthow and using that as our case study, so it's great to kind of pivot to online and still kind of delve into the history of such a fascinating building in the city. So thanks a lot for that. We are asking for your feedback for this event, and also for our wider programming in general. We have a survey that's out right now, so we'll be linking to those in the email as well. And if you are wanting to get your credit for the conservation certificate, we will also include the quiz that it will take 2 minutes to fill out. There's about 6 questions on there that we've covered in this session, and then I'll be able to just log your credit after that. So and I'll include information about the certificate in general as well, and any other information you can find it on our website, www.vancouverheritagefoundation.org. And Bronwyn, would you be able to repeat the Vancouver Archives website for me?
Yes, just one moment. I always just Google it. It's terrible.
Vancouver.ca/archive.
It's Vancouver.ca.
I think that was it. But yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for everyone for participating, and we will see you at the next event. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.